Let us continue with this gorgeous little book, The Dukeries of Nottingham, published by Dalesman in the 1970s. We're going to look now at Chapter 10, The Chase. It is natural that this royal forest district should have been connected with venery throughout all the time from the coming of the Normans to the present. King John hunted the rides and groves of ancient Sherwood from his beloved Clipston Palace up to his death in 1216. Deer were here in great numbers, as were the last of wild boar and other game. Fox hunting was not a widespread sport until the demise of larger mammals, although it is recorded that in the 12th century King Henry II issued a mandate to Richard de Montfichet, Forester of Essex, ordering him to allow Mabel de Bosham, Abbess of Barking, to use her dogs to chase hares and foxes in Hainault Forest. This is one of the earliest references to hunting the fox. 3 hunts now operate in the country described here, though their history is a complicated one, and this chapter can do no more than summarise the past and present. The Grove and Rufford hunt came into being in 1952 as an amalgamation of the Grove and the Rufford. Both countries have a common origin, in fact, and were originally hunted by hounds owned by the 2nd Earl of Scarborough and kept at Sanderbeck Hall in the first half of the 18th century. The country now hunted extends about 30 miles from east to west and 40 miles from north to south, and covers most of North Nottinghamshire and the adjacent fringes of Derbyshire and South Yorkshire. The kennels are at Barnby Moor, between Blythe and Retford. Lady Anne Cavendish Bentinck, eldest daughter of the Duke of Portland, was master between 1957 and 1966, being succeeded by Mr. A. Snipe of Barnby Manor near Newark. The Grove country has existed since 1827. In the early years, George Saville Foljambe of Osberton Hall was the master. The 6th Viscount Galway was master 1845 to 46, succeeded by Richard Lumley, later the 9th Earl of Scarborough, 1846 to 58. Viscount Galway took over once again in 1858, being succeeded at his death in 1876 by the 7th Viscount. The latter retired in 1907 and sold his hounds to the 7th Earl Fitzwilliam and lent him the Thirlby Kennels. The Rufford took its name from Rufford Abbey. In the 17th century, the country of this pack was hunted by Theophilus, 4th Earl of Lincoln, who died in 1667. Later it was hunted by Lord Castleton and then by the 3rd Earl of Scarborough, up to his death in 1752. Eventually, George Saville Foljambe of Osberton took over the Rufford pack. When he went blind in 1845, the hounds were sold for £3,500, and 4 horses sold at Tattersall's fetched £1,170. After that time, the Savilles of Rufford were great supporters of the new Rufford hunt, providing the kennels in the grounds of Rufford Abbey. The 4th Earl Manvers accepted the office of master in 1900, and after his retirement in 1920, there were several notable men at the helm, including the Marquess of Titchfield, now the 7th Duke of Portland. The second hunt operating within the country covered by this book, albeit upon its southern margins, is the South Notts hunt. The country extends 30 miles between east and west and 14 miles from north to south, lying largely in the southern part of Nottinghamshire and the southeastern fringes of Derbyshire. North of the River Trent, the country is gently hilly, but to the south it is comparably level with heavy, damp soils. The most suitable horse is compact and capable of going uphill easily. The area is part of that hunted before 1667 by Theophilus, 4th Earl of Lincoln. In 1775, John Musters hunted the district, and on retirement 30 years later handed over to his son, John Choworth Musters, the most notable master of hounds of his age. He lived at Annesley Park, near the Hucknall Torkard, and had 4 sets of kennels. Most memorable was his control of hounds, but in 1845 these were sold and he retired. For 17 years there was no hunting done over this country. but in 1862 John Chaworth Musters, grandson of the former, came to Annesley Park and got another pack together. From 1882 to 1917, the master was the Earl of Harrington, and the hunt was then known as the Earl of Harrington's. Hounds were hunted 5 days a week, and by 1908 there were 86 couple hounds in the kennels. After Lord Harrington's death in 1917, there were several masters. Between 1956 and 1965, Lieutenant Colonel G. H. Vere Laurie and Lieutenant Colonel Foreman Hardy were joint masters. The former has served as master and joint master for several years since 1965. The kennels are kept at Epperstone, between Oxton and Loudham. The third hunt, operating within the bounds of the country described here, is the Rufford Forest Harriers. As already mentioned, Lady Anne Cavendish Bentinck was the master of the Grove and Rufford between 1957 and 1966. In the latter years, she formed the Welbeck Harriers and the Rufford Forest Foxhounds, with kennels at Shire Oaks Hill Farm near Cuckney. Both were private packs. In 1970, Lady Anne decided to give up the Foxhound pack and keep the Harriers only. From that time, the remaining pack has been called the Rufford Forest Harriers, which hunt both hares and foxes. The country covered lies to the west of the Nottingham Bawtry Road, the A614, from the edge of the country hunted by the South Notts Hunt in the south to the Worksop Retford Railway in the north. It is nearly all woodland, with some plough and fly fences. This is the true hunt of the forest, the one with the most affinity to the DUKERIES proper. Hare hunting has been called the queen of all venery. Now we come to chapter 11 as we move through this book about the DUKERIES of Nottinghamshire. This is Farming Patterns, chapter 11. The farmland, which now occupies so much of the area cleared of forest down the centuries, varies a great deal in fertility and in the use to which it is put. The Magnesian limestone escarpment, which extends down the western margins of the district, gives rise to fertile land much used for arable crops, as about Whitwell, Empton and Scarcliffe. To the east is the broad belt of relatively infertile Bunter sandstone land, on which most of ancient Sherwood and most of the great estate land lies. In order to grow sugar beet and other root crops successfully, irrigation has to be practiced in dry summer conditions. Anyone crossing Thoresby Park by the public road can see spray irrigation on sugar beet land in summer. Without it, the crop would fail and, in windy weather, the loose soil would blow away. As the eastern and southeastern margins of the district are reached, towards the broad floodplain of the Trent, the land becomes heavy and clays abound. This is mixed farming country with wheat and beef cattle predominant, though sugar beet is important near Newark and Nottingham due to the proximity of sugar factories there. The outstanding agricultural feature of the district lies at the heart of that triangle of Nottinghamshire, with Tuxford, Newark and Ollerton at its angles. This is entirely rural country, with the villages of Egmonton, Laxton, Ossington and Norrell dotted about the gently swelling farmland, broken by several large woods. For a long time before the Norman conquest, the open field farming system had operated, and it continued with few modifications throughout most of fertile lowland England until the late 17th and early 18th centuries. Only after about 1740 did enclosure become organised on a national basis, with parliamentary commissioners who had power to make orders of compulsory enclosure. Between 1760 and 1780, 2 million acres were enclosed, bringing more and more good farmland into the hands of fewer and fewer noble landowners. At Laxton, 4 miles east of Ollerton, entire enclosure never came, and to this day the 3 great fields, Westfield, Millfield and Southfield, stand, as from time immemorial, divided into strips separated by grassy tracts called sykes, which are never cultivated. Each syke has its own name, and it has long been the tradition to auction off to right the cut the hay from them. The highest bidder for each syke places a small sum of money into a common purse, which later purchases refreshments for the benefit of all workers. Before the Norman conquest, Laxton was the property of the Saxon Toshi. William I granted it to the Norman nobleman Geoffrey Asselin, and by marriage it came into the hands of the Norman family of Ducos. This family also spelt its name Chaos, and were lords of the manor of Chaos or Colsall, now Old Brampton, in North Derbyshire, until the extinction of the male line in 1460. The best-known member of the family was Matilda de Cosse, to whom the manor of Laxton came in 1186, and who died in 1224. Not in 1618 did the village pass out of the hands of this family, when it was sold to George Villiers, Marquess of Buckingham, for £6,000. In 1640 it was sold to Robert Pierpont, 1st Earl of Kingston. The 5th Earl was created Duke of Kingston in 1715, a dukedom which lapsed with the death of the 2nd Duke in 1773. However, in 1806 his heir was created Earl Manvers to revive the name which had been in the family since 1297. On the death of Evelyn Robert Pierpont, 5th Earl Manvers, a few years ago, Laxton was sold in lieu of death duties to the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. The Minister of Agriculture is now the lord of the manor. Even with mechanisation, one can see a really busy scene at harvest time, when men and machines are working on their own strips of corn. In no other place can one see so many at work in one great field, giving the impression of medieval husbandry despite the use of modern machinery with its attendant noise. The administration of work in Laxton's great fields is no haphazard affair. The court of the manor continues the regulation of husbandry as in earlier times. There is a bailiff, at present Mr. Tom Rose, whose family have lived here for a long period, who is directly answerable to the lord of the manor. Each of the 3 fields has a foreman and jurors, and an inspection of the land is held every 3 years when that particular field is in wheat. The rotation of crops is winter wheat, spring corn, oats, barley, beans and peas, and bare fallow. A modification in recent years has been the undersowing of the spring corn with a lea which takes the place of the bare fallow so as to cut out the wastefulness of this 3rd year. There is some enclosed land in Laxton parish, of course, and several areas were enclosed in 1908, but the majority of the arable acreage is still contained within the 3 great fields. In December, the jury makes an inspection of the land, and fines are imposed on tenants responsible for bad husbandry or for leaving soil on common land, bad ditching, and the like. Half this fine goes to the lord of the manor, and the rest purchase ale for the jury. When foot and mouth disease came to Laxton in 1968, all the sheep in the village and about 300 cattle had to be destroyed. The grazing of animals communally has its problems. The greatest change to the social and economic life of the parish has been the swing from farming for subsistence to production for the market. Otherwise, the pattern is as before, and uniquely so in Britain. In direct contrast to the basic arrangements of this fossil farming at Laxton are many large modern agricultural units throughout the district. Large pedigree British Frisian herds are kept by T. Baddeley at Kilton Forest Farm and Carlton Forest Farm near Worksop. The Welbeck Estates Company Limited has a pedigree Ayrshire herd and a large flock of sheep. These are simply examples of large farm units, typical of many throughout this varied landscape, ranging from fertile clay soils to arid sands where trees make the best use of the land.